All right, so this video we're gonna start talking about the thread of the hips, and the legs, and where those start to come in. The thread of the hips and the legs from his position, and how normal, what we would consider high, powerful, hierarchy, positional type stuff in jiu-jitsu or grappling may actually cause problems in a weapons-based environment. That's so tactical. Weapons-based environment. I don't know who said that, but I stole it from somebody. It's probably Craig Douglas. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So let's look at a couple of things right out of the gate, right? So let's say he's in turtle or something like that. If I have, more from a traditional grappling experience, if I have exposure to the back, generally speaking, I'm not saying that's how everybody is, but generally speaking, I look to get hooks in or get my hips on top of his back and take complete back control in some form or fashion, right? The problem with that is if I float my hips on top of his hips in any way, shape, or form, I actually allow him to get a structure that I don't want him to be able to get. In a weapons situation, even in turtle, he can still maneuver his hands, he can still access his belt line, he can still do other things. So that can become a big problem, right? If let's say I have him like flattened out, boom, 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 and I have him into this, keeping him flattened out in this position is actually a better bet than bailing on this, getting my hips over his hips, which in this moment in time allows him to start rebuilding a structure. And then if you go back to our hierarchy video, I've taken him from what works from a beneficial place to maybe not so beneficial place, right? Let's say I even were to get hooks in and we were to get into some type of, awesome roll to our back, which we wouldn't necessarily suggest in any way, shape, or form. Okay, with this, yes, are there opportunities at high-level grapplers where they'll be able to completely take this guy out of commission as far as control? Sure. But again, he has access. Now he has movement out of his hips. Now he has access to his belt line, right? Because I turned it upwards and he can get hands moving. He can make hand switches. And while I'm sitting here, potentially going for a rear naked choke and he's stabbing me in the head, it's not a really fair trade-off, right? So we want to start looking at the idea of avoiding putting my hips, my base, over top of his base directly where he can impact it and affect it, right? So if he's on the other side, it's another place that you'll see this, right? One of the reasons that we won't ever suggest going to mount, okay? Out here on the outside of the body, again, I can create leverage. I have good base. We're avoiding the legs, which we're going to talk about a lot throughout this program. But as I'm into this position here, I have options for extending and controlling the blade out, and I'm in control of my hips, right? I'm in control of my base. The second I go up over top of him, right, even if I'm climbing, I give him opportunities to take my base off, and then in those cases, again, he doesn't need a lot of room and space to do damage with a blade. So I get slid across the gut, or I lose my position of balance, or I eat a knife to the face because I gave him my base in that position. So you're going to notice a lot of what we do throughout the entirety of this program is going to involve us essentially staying off to the sides, flattening them out, giving base and control, and maintaining control of our own base as we go to move. Okay, so even when we start to look at just the center line idea, like being up over top of them, whether it's a back control or a mount control as a center line, we avoid the center line a lot. And even if we do cross the center line, we usually cross it only when they're prone, right? So if he's prone, he's face down, turtle, something like that, I can move from one side and essentially around that hip because I don't have to worry about his legs getting involved. But I don't float on the center line. I'm not staying back here where I lose pressure on his shoulders and allow him to move and shift his hands, right? So if I'm moving across the center line, I'm moving relatively quickly across that center line, right? Center line across the hips, more specifically. What you will not see, right, is us suggesting at any point in time that I cross the hips when he's supine or when he's upright. Because if I go to cross the hips here, right, he starts to entangle his legs, takes my base off. Even if he doesn't know what the hell he's doing, again, he's affecting my base. So long story short, this entire video is about controlling your ability to control your own base, right? And the second that I give that up and surrender that over to the other person, that can end relatively poorly for us. So long story short, for the most part, we're gonna avoid getting and sitting directly on top of the hips. We're gonna kind of, for the most part, stay to the outsides of that center line across the hip. And if you are gonna pass that center line, I want them face down, prone, where it's harder for them to impact me with their legs, as opposed to supinated facing up, where they can entangle and grab and kick and all the other kind of fun stuff. So a couple theories and concepts to keep in mind, again, while you're exploring the program and you're exploring a little grappling.